my friends, this is Rick, and I am Rick, and this is your seat of the table, and I think that's Frankie scratching at the door over there, I think. Anyway, we are looking at a Fan Pro product from WizKids Games, Mercenaries Supplemental, the update book. Now, I was lucky a few months ago, and I spotted this on a online game store that had some, and they were quote used. But frankly, I'm telling you, this book was bloody new. I don't know what their idea of used is, but I only paid $20 for it, a little bit more than $20 for it. And there was actually, and then there was a confusion because there's actually a different version of this that's a revised instead of update, and it's actually not. It's significantly different. The two books can be different. I mean, they're not just a slightly revised version of the first, and I found that kind of be a bit confusing. And I've heard people talk about that confusion over time when we're dealing with get that clear off that gloss. When we're dealing with Fan Pro, some of that Fan Pro material led some people to have confused opinions on it because just that reason. They would produce something and then a short time later they would come out with an updated version of the original. And instead of calling it something completely different or something related to a series such as the Mercenary Supplemental series, book number 4, book number 20, or 3069, which is what this is set in, then it just makes it a bit more, right? Or is it something I really need or something I really want, etc., etc.? There is some significant differences. I mean, they payroll. It's like when when they started producing this book, these field manuals actually serve a major purpose. So these do as well, but there's some goods and bad to it, and we're going to get into that just a little bit here. So let's go ahead and open it up. Like I said, the setting was 3069, and it took me a little while to read through most of it, and I've got what I wanted to read. And we are setting, let's see, nice Paying Deuce, a nice little short story that comes out, and introduction. It hardly takes a genius to see the universe has changed a lot in just a few short years. In 3066, the Mercenary Review and Bonding Commission, on a neutral panel to escape the industry-wide perception that Wolf Dragoons, the preeminent mercenary force of our time, exerted undue influence over the profession, painted their own views and practices of hired soldiers everywhere. The result was the creation of the revised field manual Mercenaries and the start of a regular series of supplemental volumes. These documents were intended to bring employers and mercenaries alike up to speed at current state of professional soldiering and a clear and unbiased point of view. The opening of the official MRBC branch offices on Galatia and Toxamor worlds such as Ark Royal, Solaris 7, and Westerhand, combined with this effort to underscore the fact that the MRBC's efforts to emerge from the Dragon's shadow are finally working. Then came the Jihad. The surprise assault on outrage may have started before the World Bank officially declared its war on the rest of humanity, but history may well record that Jihad in fact began there, rather than on Tharkat or New Avalon. Indeed, with the shattering of the Wolf's Dragoons and the fall of the hiring halls in Harlock, our successors may well record that the first shots of the sphere-spanning war were fired by hired guns loyal to shadow employers, and with the fact the mercenary universe has been turned upside down. Today, ironically enough, marks the 4th anniversary of the Werder Blake's final assault against Outreach. On this date in 3068. Bloody battle began that would be accumulating 8 days later in indiscriminate nuclear bombardment with a death toll that remains incalculable even now, etc. So, once again, each one of these books adds another missing piece to the puzzle of what the hell the Jihad era was and what the Dark Age era that follows the Jihad was to me personally. And I made this mention before in a different video, and I probably will harp on it a couple times before I'm from here on out, just because. One of the things that confused the bejesus out of me after FASA bellied up, and it looked like the game and the franchise BattleTech was on its way out the door to join the dusty shelves of numerous other game companies and game franchises of history, was that there was no clear-cut follow-up right off the bat. There was no, we just bought the company and we bought it from FASA and we're moving into and you should stick with us kind of thing. There was this muddled, what happened to FASA? How come it shut its doors so fast? What really went on? Because we didn't know for years until, like I said, I got to see a video recently on Renegade HPG of somebody who was working back at that time and talked about it a little bit to start to really understand. And part of that confusion was I didn't understand that the Jihad and the Dark Age wasn't the same thing. I was under to me, it felt like the Jihad led to the Dark Age, which it did, but that it happened like this. And that there was a whole lot of missing what ifs. And then the fact that suddenly WizKids shows up and they start producing these click style mechs, what I immediately look at as a kid's toy and thought, nope, not for me, and not even gonna look at them. And that kind of that was the final push to push the door shut for me. And the material and the novels they first started putting out, and like I said, I got the first five or six or seven of them. And since then, I have bought a number of Dark Age novels that I'm trying to chew my way through. And God, not that the writing is bad, the stories are awful. And in the aspect that I still haven't enough material for them to connect with me. So I have to grind my way through them a few pages at a time, which sucks because I got some newer, updated, recent release novels I really want to read, but I hate reading 3/4 of a book and then shutting it down. I mean, I really kind of have to grind my way through this and get it done, and then maybe do a review on it, and it won't be flattering. I don't review novels too well. I mean, I have a bad habit of going off on tangents. We go running down these funky little smiley face holes because I'm trying to figure out just what it is I'm trying to say and what I think. Anyway, so the problem came back is that I didn't understand until very recently that not only was the Jihad era actually distinctly separate from the Dark Age era, that a significant amount of time and space had passed some 65 years. And I always knew that there was a sudden leap forward by the Dark Age, which really was another one of those nudges of shutting the door that I was having problems with because I was so upset that there was so much unaddressed baggage in the room from FASA shutting its doors that I just felt it was just they're going to create a brand new game that's completely unrelated to anything that I am familiar with or want to go into. So that's all part of the loss and stuff. And every time I find one of these Fan Pro WizKids books and PDFs and stuff that I can plug in and read, I start getting a little bit bigger picture and understanding. So, and that's my wife out there screaming at one of the cats because cats are people. And she argues with them. And she let Sissy outside and Fluffy outside for a while. And they're really outside cats, but they get she don't like chasing around the yard, which my argument is don't chase them around the yard. Anyway, just let them go. If they come back, they come back. Technically, they're not our cats; they're the neighbor's cats. But anyway. So we talked mercenaries, the Jihad, and they break down some of the ones that were directly affected by the issue on outreach. Mercs under fire with the devastation of outreach. The merc industry lost more than a few legends and places to do business. This was another sore point that cropped up for some of us because out of nowhere, boom, a whole bunch of well-loved, well-known, hated mercenary commands up and die. And they do it in an inglorious manner, in a haphazard. Well, let's just say let's randomly pick these guys, and these guys, and oh well, those guys were kind of popular. F them, because that was FASA, not us. So that kind of mindset really chews out a person and has its effect. The other thing is like what happened, how it happened. Some of it made no sense. So, and this book is kind of helping put together a little bit more of a consensus on it. I still have the opinion certain commands just ceased to exist because it was just there's so many of them. It's so hard to say and give everybody their proper due and their proper moment in the sun or moment in the setting sun scenario or whatever. So we go through all this, and it brings us into the individual units of that era, the 3069 era, that that survived in some manner or another, and where they're at, what they're doing, to what their composed are, their mindset, how they're seen a little bit by their peers. Some of these are new, some of them were not new a few years prior to when FASA ended. These are new units that came out. Then there was always that given that just because the units are listed. We all know about the Kellhounds and Hanson Rough Riders and McCarran's Armored Cavalry, etc., etc. But there was 100 other unknowns. This is where the fan base really come into play. This is one of those things that BattleTech really brought to the table and still does. That when it comes to factions, you don't really have to pick a particular faction. You don't have to be part of House Liao or House Steiner. You don't have to be part of the Outworlds Alliance. You don't have to be Whirler Blake. You don't have to be any of those. You could choose to be your own entity and create a mercenary command, and then you just pick and choose who you work for and how long you're going to work for them and what caveats you're going to expect and accept, etc. And this gives you this excellent opportunity to play the field, to play all the factions, play against all the factions, and still be your own entity and not get stuck down. That's one of the downsides of playing house units. If you're a really big fan of playing house units, well then traditionally you either pick a specific unit and that's your troubleshooting unit that you're going to play representing the house in certain campaigns or scenarios. Or you're going to choose to play a scattering of different commands that are affiliated to that particular house. And once again, just because the house roles show these regiments, these regimental formations, these commands, etc., like this, you can still add your own and come up with your own version and your own completely distinctive House Davion force. And the upside of being a house unit is generally you don't have to worry so much about supply, logistics, resources for repair and materials for replacements and troops and payroll. All this stuff is taken care of fictionally by the corporate or the government entity behind you. Where mercenary commands, if you really get into the nuts and bolts or the mechanics of running one, it really does take a lot more to the table doing that. So that said, that there's a lot more merc commands out there than what was listed at any time in any source book at any era of the franchise, regardless of what company was in play. But that said, there's a lot of these traditionals. We find them that come along, and some of them come later and become quite well known, in part because their inclusion in novels. And then there are so many of these franchises that came in from the very that began the game company. We've been there all along since all of us joined up in the 3025 era that did not get any supplements created at all or barely a passing mention. So when you get books like this, it kind of gives them an opportunity to bring forward. Now, once again, all that said, one of the things I don't like about this particular style of book is that it's lacking the mechanic part. We don't actually see a breakdown. In some of the other supplements, we will see a unit and it will come in and it will say, and it will give us, a breakdown and what's the regiment, it's got aerospace, what's it called, a little bit more detail in there, right? It'll come up with the stats and things like that. And some books will even have whole sections in the back where you're dealing with more details from the mechanics side of things. But this book doesn't do that. There's just not that much in here in the way of overviews of that kind of stuff. And that's fine. I mean, it's what it is, right? So, and like I said, some oldies but goodies set up by what they're doing in the era of 3069 and how they're set up or who they're tied to at the moment, and go on and go for it, and so forth and so on. And then we'll skip back here to the back end, where we have some supplemental stuff, because most of these books include some supplemental things, rules additions or clarifications, other information that we tend to find of interest or useful. I often would tell people that, yes, I have the mercenary command book. I have the mercenary supplement book. I have this book, and this book. So what was the latest, the newest one published? If there's any caveat in the rules, traditionally we will examine those rules and decide whether or not they should supplement earlier rule sets. Because sometimes just adding them and then adding them in then becomes problematic, because then we have 4 different rule sets, 4 different variations on a specific rule of how something is done. So, you know, forced withdrawal, for example, is not new. There are other game books out in fact that have this, or a variation on it. And so does this predate the others? Does it make sense? It could be just my eyeballs, but this page here seems to be a little fuzzy. Yeah, it's not my eyeballs. This one here had a printing error. Now I know why the book is new, or near new. This would have been one of those where they probably just didn't quite make the cut from the publisher, and instead of destroying it, it gets sold secondhand to the secondhand market, which is fine because then it ends up in my hands. That's just, you know, if one page is off or there's some kind of print error or some glitch or something, that doesn't ruin the bulk of the book. So, you know, like I said, so we get into some breakdown and some specific rule sets or options or caveats for the particular units. You know, it just, you know, there's another page that's just slightly off print. It's got a, you can see the shadow print behind it, so when they printed it, it slid. So it says here, Wanamaker's Widowmakers, see page 78. In addition, the Widowmakers have grown adept at using reconnaissance to pinpoint enemy forces and lay savage ambushes. To reflect this, any scenario where the Widowmakers act as the attacker, every 4 Widowmaker units may start the scenario hidden per the hidden rules, see page 83. In addition to BMR, in addition to determining forces, the Widowmakers may roll once for every 2 units on the B column of the Word of Blake random assignment table, C 220 of the FMU updates. Widowmakers aerospace units are rolled entirely from the same table. All right. So then we have the Mercenary Rules Annex. Once again, additional stuff that can be either supplementing earlier material or additionally adding to your repertoire, things like this. New employers, Jihad rules, mercenary annex. Yes, Frankie, I hear you. Then we have some replacement equipment expansions, procuring support vehicles for spacecraft, salvage quality equipment, base components price list, salvage quantity equipment table, black market buying and selling, selling out, miscellaneous personal rules, defections and retirement, improving skills, basic skill improvement table. And we have some new vehicles, Crow Scout at BTOL, Saxon APC, the OPI Hazmat recovery vehicle. I always find these sort of things fascinating, because when they include stuff that is non-technically supporting units and things like this, this helps us understand how certain things are dealt with. So if you have a mech unit that suffers some radiation damage and or fusion engine after residual effect, or something that's toxic or poisonous, then how do they recover that unit? How do they get that machine cleaned off so it's no longer toxic or dangerous to the people standing around next to it? And seeing things like this just gives us a window into that sort of side of stuff. So it's like the Hyena salvage mech. Once again, this is a machine that's designed to recover other machines, and technically, you know, it's not designed for combat, but it includes a small laser. Well, a small laser, I imagine, is more for about cutting something open or cutting something off, so you can help further sanction stuff. So here we have yet another class of dropship, the Aurora, and once again, I've done a couple of videos on the. This was $25, $29.99 brand new, and I think I got it for $20. So one of the things about in spaceships and dropships era is it makes a point that they don't cover all the varieties, that there are many more types of dropships available, and more than a few jump ship designs available that were not covered in those particular supplements. And that was to always always there for a reason. And I have every once in a rare moon, I'll get somebody who will ask, well, why didn't they just have it all in there? Why did they just have this? Well, because it leaves some room for innovation and for later down the road, for inclusion of new stuff, for the opportunity to sell material, additional material to the fan base to keep the company running. I'm not adverse to that. It's just like I'm gonna be harping about that one D&D stuff that's going on right now. I'm not against any game company. I'm not against Wizards of the Coast making money. In order to produce new material, they need the money to produce it. And they need the money to pay their people and to keep the franchise going and keep the material going and keep the games growing and expanding and new eras coming in. Catalyst needs to get paid. I have not an issue with it. I do have issues with the way it's being approached by some of these corporations and how ham-fisted they are, or how suddenly they were very open and okay about it, and suddenly now they woke up and realized just how much is being generated by third-party organizations based off of their intellectual property rights, and now they want a big chunk. And it's not that they go over to them and say, look, you're making $200,000 a year plus. We would like to get, I don't know, give us 2% of that. Just give us 2% of whatever you make, and as a fee for the franchise right. Or we want 5%. In some cases, they're asking for 30 and 40%, and that's just absurd. So, and for that level of material, that's the equivalent of a creator and an author and a publisher. Now, this publisher wants a big chunk of the author's revenue. Well, that publisher bloody well needs to step up and offer that author a lot more resources and assistance and stuff to do that. So if you're doing this third-party operation, you give them the right to use open source material and things like this, and then later you change those rules and say, oh no, we want start crossing our palms with a lot more of that. You're making a lot of money, we want our piece of it. Well, fine, but if you're going to ask for absorbent amount of money, at that point you change the dynamics for both sides. Then you need to step up and become more author publisher kind of thing, in my opinion. But that's just my opinion. Anyway, enough babbling about this one. Until next time. Going on, my friends, this is Rick, and hey, if you like the channel, please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, tell your buddies, tell your friends, tell your coworkers, tell anybody else that's in the gaming industry or gaming fandom that says, hey, this is a channel worth checking out, right? Till next time.